All right, this is Byron. We're back. We've been going through Romans. Currently, we're on Romans chapter 1, looking at verse 22 and 23. And I just want to go back and make sure we know who exactly we're speaking of here in 22 and 23. So let me read verse 18. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men which hold the truth in unrighteousness. So we're talking about men who hold the truth in unrighteousness. And then if we go to verse 22, which is where we're at in our reading, it says, professing themselves to be wise, they became fools, and changed the glory of an uncorruptible God into an image made like to corruptible man, and to birds, and four-footed beasts, and creeping things. And what we've been doing for a couple of videos here is just going back and trying to see some of the origins or the foundations that were laid back in Genesis, some of the things that we can look at and see. Well, is anything said in Genesis that could help us to understand who these people are? And we've looked a little bit in Genesis 3, also I believe Genesis 4. And today we're going to be looking at Genesis 6. And just want to read the text here, get to a certain point, and then we'll go back and start talking about it. This will help us to develop who exactly the people are. There's more to this than just Genesis 6. We'll continue on. But I want to make sure that we at least cover the parts of Genesis 6 that I believe that are pertinent. So in Genesis 6, verse 1, we read, and it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. And the Lord said, my spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh. Yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and creeping things, and the fowls of the air, for it repented me that I have made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. These are the generations of Noah. And I'm going to stop right there because it's going to read a little bit about Noah's generations. But Noah did find grace in the eyes of the Lord, and we may cover a little more on that here short. But looking back at what we've read here in Genesis, there's a couple of things that are very important. And one of the things that is actually kind of controversial, people have differing opinions on, is in verse 2, it says, the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. And honestly, this is the first time sons of God shows up in the Bible in that phrase. The word for son is the Hebrew word bin, and then for God it's Elohim. And you can find it in other locations throughout the Bible. You can kind of find how it's used in the context in Job. Let's go to Job and see how sons of God is used in Job. Okay, looking in Job, when we get to Job, it's in chapter 1 and verse 6 is where we see a mention of sons of God. So let's read that and kind of get a sense of how it's used. Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them. And the Lord said unto Satan, whence comest thou? Then Satan answered the Lord and said, from going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it. Now at this point you can definitely see that Satan is in the earth. Also there are sons of God. Sometimes people say sons of God are fallen angels. I don't necessarily follow that. And I'm going to show you why I don't follow that. Okay. Later in the New Testament, you're going to see some verses that talk about sons of God. And let's go there and look at some of those verses just to get an idea of what the phrase sons of God and how it's used throughout the Bible. Okay. We're going to look in John chapter 1. Right in the beginning, John addresses the foundations of the world. I think I've referenced that in some other videos. But let's start in verse 10 and read through verse 12. Maybe we may go to 13, but let's start in verse 10 so we get a sense of what's going on. In verse 10 it says, He was in the world, and the world was made by Him, and the world knew Him not. So we know, just based on how it's reading here, we're talking about Jesus. And then in 11, He came unto His own, and His own received Him not. Again, another reference, we're talking about Jesus. And then in verse 12, But as many as received Him, to them gave He power to become sons of God, even to them that believe on His name. Now, if we take that people that believe on His name can be sons of God, let's go back into Genesis and see if there's any mention there of people believing on the name, or in Genesis it's going to be calling on the Lord. Let's look at that. All right, we'll go back to Genesis chapter 4, and let's look there at the end of chapter 4. If you remember, Adam and Eve had sons. One was Cain, one was Abel. Cain killed Abel, and then Adam and Eve had another son. And let's read that account here and see what it said in the text. In verse 25 of chapter 4, And Adam knew his wife again, and she bare a son, and called his name Seth. For God, said she, hath appointed me another seed instead of Abel, whom Cain slew. And to Seth, to him also was born a son, and he called his name Enos. And then it says, Then began men to call upon the name of the Lord. If you remember what we just read in John, even those that believed on His name. Those two right there line up with me. They're saying to me, people in the early times began to call upon the name of the Lord. And John said people that even believed on His name. So those two kind of make sense to me. Let's go and look at some other things in the New Testament. Okay, in looking at this, we'll actually look in Romans, and it's chapter 8. We're skipping a little ahead in Romans, but we're going to be able to support sons of God. All right, so let's look at Romans chapter 8, verse 14. Let's read that. For as many as are led by the Spirit of God, they are the sons of God. And then in verse 19, let's look at this. For the earnest expectation of the creature waiteth for the manifestation of the sons of God. So we see that based on what we've read here in the New Testament, those that are led by the Spirit of God are the sons of God, which brings us to another point back in Genesis. Let's go back there and look at Genesis again and look at the Spirit. Back in Genesis, in the same text that we just read in chapter 6 and in verse 3, listen to what God says about Spirit. And the Lord said, My Spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh, yet his days shall be numbered 120 years. So we see that the Lord's Spirit was present with man. And then there's some people that come along and say, well, in Job, the sons of God couldn't have been with God because they would have had to have been like in heaven or something like that. But let's look back and see, what did Cain do earlier in this text? Cain made a decision and decided to leave the presence of the Lord, and we know that Cain was on the earth. So the sons of God that we read about in Job could have been men calling upon the name of the Lord in the presence of the Lord, just as we see Cain right here would leave the presence of the Lord. Let's look at where it mentions that Cain did so. Okay, in Genesis chapter 4, verse 16. It reads, And Cain went out from the presence of the Lord and dwelt in the land of Nod on the east of Eden. So in these few verses here, we've shown that, one, the sons of God are those that believe upon His name, or people were given power to become sons of God that believed upon His name. Two, those that are led by the Spirit of God, they are the sons of God. Then we've seen that the Spirit of God was with man at the time in Genesis, because God said in Genesis 6:3, His Spirit will not always strive with man. And we also see that a man, which is Cain, can leave the presence of the Lord at this time. So I can't explain everything, but I can tell you that I have had a difficult time trying to accept the fact that fallen angels were involved here. Now, let's talk a little bit about unequally yoking and things like that. You know, the Bible tells us several times that be thou not unequally yoked, or don't take part with things with unbelievers. And we see here in Genesis chapter 6, we see evidence that they were unequally yoked, because it says that the sons of God saw the daughters of man. I believe that the sons of God are the line of Seth that were calling upon the name of the Lord in the presence of the Lord with the Spirit of the Lord. And all this stuff is right here. Cain left the presence of the Lord, but it doesn't say that Adam and Eve or Seth left the presence of the Lord. But then the Lord did say, his spirit shall not always strive with man. I have seen in another translation of the Bible, in I believe it's the NIV, where the sons of God, the two words, Ben Elohim, in Job are actually translated as angels. So in that particular version of the Bible, in Genesis chapter 6, the same two Hebrew words are translated sons of God, yet later in the text, in Job chapter 1 verse 6, is translated as angels, I believe. So I feel it's important, at least it's important to me, that I see it in my Bible, King James Version. And I'm not saying the King James Version is the best Bible, but I do know this. It is a word-for-word translation of the accepted text at the time that it was written. Now, since that time, there actually have been other texts that the Bibles have been translated from. You'll hear the names Westcott and Hort, who were involved with the NIV. If you do a little research on that, you're going to find out that they did not use the same original documents to translate the NIV, nor were they believers in the true God. If you look into a little bit of their history, you'll see some things there that raise the eyebrows. So I will state this. I believe that there are people who consciously, and Satan is involved, who consciously want to corrupt the text that God has preserved over the years. And I have seen mentioned in other documents that say the sons of God are fallen angels. Now, I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm saying that I can't see that from my experience. Like, sometimes I just know that the Lord is not allowing me to go and see something, and this is one of those cases. So let's continue on and seeing what all happened here in this Genesis chapter 6 time frame. If you approach it from how I see it, what we have is a line of Cain who had gone out of the presence of the Lord. Later, one of Cain's sons, Lamech, well, first of all, Cain named a city after his son. Hint, hint, I'm making a name for myself. Then Lamech made a declaration as if he were God. He said, if any man shall harm me, let it come to him 70 and sevenfold. Just like the Lord had said, he would not, if anyone harmed Cain, let it come to him sevenfold. So you see this line of Cain that just seems to be saying, I'm not really going to be with God, but I'm going to be kind of like God. I'm going to make a name for myself. I'm going to have cities after my name. And then you see indications that Seth, after he was born, men began to call upon the name of the Lord. So the daughters of men, I believe, are the daughters of the line that was from Cain. Those people thinking, let me make a name for myself, let me do this. And then the sons of God would be the line of Seth. Now, in verse 4, let's look at this because this is very important. All over the internet today, you'll see the word Nephilim, and Nephilim translates as giant. But let's look in Genesis 4 and just see how the verse reads and see what does it say as it reads in the King James Version. There were giants in the earth in those days. And then you see a semicolon. A semicolon separates two independent clauses. So as it reads, there were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in into the daughters of men, they bare children to them. The same became mighty men, which were of old, men of great renown. So first of all, you see very plainly in the text that giants were in the earth in those days. And then the Bible actually states, and also after there were giants in the earth in those days, when the sons of God came in into the daughters of men, they bare children to them. The same became mighty men which were of old, men of great renown. Now, men of great renown can, in my mind, go back to Cain's first son. I think it was Enoch. I'm looking now to see, so I'm not making a mistake. Yes, Cain's first son was Enoch. Well, a city was named after him. So you see, I've stated this before, and I'll keep stressing it, how men of great renown ties in with making a name of a city. Oh, well, you're well known. A city's named after you. Oh, you have a statue named after you. That's how I see that part of Genesis chapter 6. And I'm going to stop short of going through the whole flood thing because I don't necessarily think that that's as important to support those people that make idols as the manner of thinking and those things that occurred during the time just before the flood. So next, we're going to actually continue on the same verses, and we're going to actually be after the flood and see some things that impacted how men did things after the flood. Thank you.